hit record.
Our,
Oh, it is recording. Amateur night again. It's going, man.
all right, so it's week two of us recording pods, but it's week three of the season, or at least it's entering week three. I know that there's an American delay. It's kind of hard, but hey, more NBA's happened and more things have stayed the same because I guess that's what happened when you talk about the NBA on a regular basis. Top teams are still the top teams. We got Nuggets, we got Boston, who are still both very strong, but Philly, after pulling off the James Harden trade, hasn't slowed down. Tyrese Maxey looking very, very good. We've got the Pacers currently leading their conference. Heat have come alive, and now they're 6-4. And I guess the only other team you could talk about, interestingly, would be Minnesota, who 7-2 and actually beat the Nuggets and gave them their only loss, or at least one of their only losses. So one gripe that I need to get back onto, and it'll feel repetitious if you listen to every minute of last week, that in-season tournament. Week one happened, and I kind of dug it. I liked it. The courts were different. The jerseys were different. I thought I had an understanding of it. And then I looked at the, I guess, second round, second week of it, and the standings made no sense to me. I was like, well, all of the teams in this division have a loss, but all the teams in this division have a win. I thought they were playing each other as divisional rivals. This is the main gripe that I have with it.
They've been divvied up.
I
They've
don't
been
think.
divvied up according to record. So they actually put in not random, but I guess pre-allocated in-season divisions to play in.
It's too hard. Too hard. I hate it. Okay. I don't think it makes sense. I don't understand how you couldn't have them all play each other in the division, which is 4 games, which makes sense. I I think that there's a missed opportunity here. I think to bring some division elements back into play because clearly the division banners have just like secretly been phased out of the league and the old division play in or playoff spot doesn't get accounted for anymore. But this was a really good opportunity to have that where they played each other in their division. The best team from each division would come out and then play other divisions. And you could have 2 wildcard spots for the other teams with the best record and best point differential to get your 8 and then filter it down from 8 to 4 to 2 respectively. I think that there's a missed opportunity for this because uh these divisions, like, it's the weirdest thing in the world. These groups are already created. You already have these groups. You have viable competition created from division rivals, and it's not being utilized. And you know, I don't know what tier we'd put ourselves in. Maybe we're casual fans, maybe we're semi-casual fans. I wouldn't say that we're league pass 82 games per team per season kind of guys. But this is hard to follow, right? When we talked last week, I think that your knowledge of it wasn't as good as mine, but we've instantly flipped the coin because now you suddenly have more knowledge than me. But that shouldn't be the case on something that's quite simple. Maybe it's because it's inaugural rendition of it, but I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts? Do you think that they've missed opportunity with the division here, or do you like how they're doing this
Look,
random record
I'm
allocation?
going to stay consistent with my stance right now on the in-season tournament, and that I'm really impartial right now. I really don't care. I just brought it up and I'm like, oh, cool. Orlando's in Group C. We got Boston, Brooklyn, Toronto, and the Bulls. And I guess technically on paper, we're the worst team in that group. And, especially based on last season's record in that sense. Um, but, look, I think the idea was from the NBA was to try to create some level of parity with how the divisions or these groups, they're not called divisions, they're called groups, would play out. But you're right. They could have played it in their standard conference, so divisionals sort of groups in that sense. But perhaps that's where it's like then it's not really new, right? It's all about something new, yeah. So these are almost like new conferences, yeah, and new courts and a new concept and a new cup. So I guess it's all just fitting with that theme of it's just new, man. And like I said, staying consistent doesn't really move the needle for me either way. Clearly, and I've just looked, we haven't even played a game yet. Apparently, our record is 0-0. So, I guess it's yeah. Look, I don't know. I
But see,
think
that to me feels like a missed opportunity, right? So from a scheduling mindset, you would have all of the teams play on a Saturday or a Thursday, whatever time they're trying to pick this. You would make sure that everyone's playing, and every game that you're watching, you know that they're division rivals. Because let's be honest, the average NBA fan doesn't understand the divisions very well. When we were doing Immaculate Grid, it was a recurring theme that we struggled to guess a player based off a division. So this would be a way to strengthen that. You play 4 games. You play everyone in your division once, right? So you'll end up playing 4 games. There will be a pecking order that's created from that. Point differential still matters. And then what you do is you take one team out of each of the divisions and 2 wildcards. The 2 wildcards are the best records with the best point differentials that
Isn't that
didn't
what
win
they
their
do already?
conference. Well, but they're not. Okay, so if that's what they're doing, why aren't they doing it with divisions? They're doing it with this random
I feel like you're
smorgasbord.
just explaining the rules, and everyone's already known the rules for like 2 months now. I get what you're saying. You're just saying that they should have just gone back to the original classic divisional rivalries that they should have played with. But like I'm saying, that's classic. That's old. That's 1950s, man. This is 2023, and this NBA in-season cup that you can win is just something totally new, man. So this is a whole new divisions the NBA has come up with. That's probably the part you gotta like wrap your head around and just get on board, man. So you guys are what Phoenix Suns. You got some new Group A in season cup rivals here, man. That's just the reality. Yeah, you got Utah Lakers, Blazers, and Grizzlies now. They're your rivals now when you get that colored court.
I'm not. I was really high on it. I'm really low on it. Let's check in back week. Maybe I'll become lukewarm on it. I'm not too sure.
Well,
But yeah, I feel quite strong about that.
you're clearly also low on James Harden, right? That's the current take, right?
Oh, we. Oh, we. So, when obviously he makes his debut, you get that fun little stats. The first time that he's lost with a debut team, right? So he's requested his trade and he comes over and they've lost. And, well, that's all right. They're on the road and, he's getting conditioning and they're all getting used to him. And now they've dropped 4 straight. And the Clippers went from, and obviously it's early days here, but they look like they had it sorted, right? Kawhi and Paul George clearly the top 2, but Russ taking the ball handling duties and kind of doing a bit of everything. Now James Harden's come in, and the box score might lie to you. You might be like, okay, he's like what 12 and 13 and 7, but he's ruined it. He's absolutely ruined it, right? And it's one of those unique scenarios where Philly, who has not had James Harden on their team, is 8-1, and Clippers, who have added James Harden to the team, are 0-4. So it's a little bit of a biased stat here, but essentially the swing for James Harden is like 11 games, right? A team without James Harden is on pace to be 11 games better than a team with James Harden. And, I think I hated on it last week, and I'm really glad that I took that. I know that you tried to like buffer it with a little bit of neutrality on, it's a regular season choice and it's going to build, but they're hurting themselves right now. And in the Western Conference, it's going to be very competitive. I don't think you can afford to be dropping this many games and venturing into Memphis territory after just 1 week of your new star acquisition.
I don't have enough sort of statistics and analytics to sort of maybe significantly comment in some of these areas with facts. But something that I've observed here is that I believe Ty Lue is starting all 4 All Stars here at the same time, and they probably need to consider taking a book, a player out of Steve Kerr's book here, where he sent CP3 to the bench. It's sometimes you just don't need a duplicate of skill sets on the court at the same time, and that's obviously just a starting 5 in the sense, or starting 4, but it feels like they just got to find the right combination on how to stagger these players and their skill sets, and that takes some time. It does take some time. I'm not I'm not selling, sort of sold out on the Clippers here. I think they're still going to get it going. That's my sort of longer term for the rest of the season outlook here. I think they're still going to make at least a play in, okay? And then, and they still potentially could make a top 6. But they got to get going. They got to figure out these rotations. And they probably got to accept that James Harden is getting old. Yeah, I think we always talk about James Harden and, and that he's that guy that used to drop 30, then he was 20 and 10 last season, and he's probably no longer 20 and 10 anymore. That's the reality. And, I think look, his stats are probably probably could expect a little bit more from him right now. It's like 14, 5 and 5. You could probably expect something like 18 and 7 or something like that. But it's clearly he's on the decline. He's on the decline. He's going to get less touches, and you just got to. I don't know. I think that you just got to go back to that hierarchy that I guess probably PG is like your number 1 option. Quiet plays of him, All right, and then these other guys are the third and fourth option, and they've got to sort of play accordingly.
Do you get this vibe that this current scenario with Harden to the Clippers is very akin to Carmelo to OKC? Are you getting that vibe?
I didn't think a Carmelo to OKC was that bad. What do you mean? Like, I guess,
Well, the Carmelo is he comes. There's that discussion about coming off the bench. There's that fitting in with what Russ and PG were already doing. And then basically playing that season, getting bounced in the first round, and then not being in the league for essentially a season or two until he gets picked up by Portland. Do you think that James Harden's at risk of that? He's in the last year of his contract. He's joined this super team. It's not looking good. He should probably come off the bench, or Russ should come off the bench, but someone's going to have to sacrifice. They're probably going to get bounced in the first round. And then are we looking at a parallel universe where Carmelo is now just James Harden, two offensively elite players that really had one style of play, and now they're being phased out of that?
hey, that's a great take actually. I'd never really considered it. I guess if you're actually specifically alluding to James Harden in comparison with Carmelo, I was thinking more of the situation in OKC. All right, so yeah, if you're more alluding to James Harden and Carmelo, what happened there, then Carmelo's sort of, I guess, roller coaster last few seasons that then ended up he basically did not get a final contract and then had to retire, I guess. Could that or will that play out for James Harden? I'd have to say there's probably definitely a probability that would occur, could occur. I think so. But I think it's still early days. I think a part of that too is that though your last final years, whatever age you are, and whatever impact you have at that point, a lot of that's got to do with money as well. Yeah. I think again, if you're willing to come in and take less money at that point of your career, and there are situations that looking for what you can offer still, he'll probably get a contract. Yeah. But is that something they would want, or he wouldn't want that sort of role or that sort of opportunity if they're not contenders or so on and so forth? Is it enough money or so on and so forth? Would he wait for something better? There's probably some level of risk that he would do that too. So yeah, look, it's going to be really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's actually an interesting thought here. Do you actually put James Harden in the same tier as Carmelo? Because I would say Carmelo, even though I've had some, had some knocks on him, I would say Carmelo was in his prime and over the course of career more impactful than Harden.
Well, now we've really it's the same. This isn't a live stream, and people could engage with us in real time. I disagree. I think you've got James Harden, who's an MVP, and I think irrelevant of his flame out in the playoffs, he consistently got his teams to second and or third rounds. But I think we've talked about this a little bit, that sometimes losing is like adds this level of credibility that you wouldn't figure in a loss. But being up 3-2 against those Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, I know that they choked Game 6, and then choked Game 7 with that ridiculous 24 threes in a row missed. But to get them to the brink, right, without Chris Paul, he is responsible for that. I think that's more impressive than whatever Carmelo did. And we talked about Carmelo. He made to the conference finals once, and he went through, two stars that at that phase weren't very good, and obviously then got trumped by Kobe. So no, I don't agree with you on that one. I think that Harden's probably a better scorer, right? Like Carmelo's a mid-range scorer. This guy is obviously a free throw / 3-point assassin. The assists are better as well. So yeah,
Let me ask you another
interesting.
question. I actually read this article when Harden was traded to the Clippers, and it said Harden is joining three Hall of Famers, and he'll be the fourth. And I guess this is a bit
Mhm.
of a I sort of read that twice, and I was like, hold on, is PG a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, out of the four of them, I agree with you. He's the hardest one to give it to, um, because there's no individual accolades. I think a most improved player, if I'm getting it correctly, couple of All NBAs, couple of NBA All
He
Star
needs to win a ring.
appearances.
He needs to win a ring. That's it. I
To
think
him, yeah, you don't see him winning anything else. He's not going to win MVP or Defensive Player of the Year or anything like that. So yeah, you're probably right. He does need to get a ring.
it felt like a bit of a bit of an oversight in that article that, oh, these four guys are Hall of Famers. Kawhi's, I think, a lock. Westbrook is a lock. You'd have to say Harden is simply because he has an MVP. He had some level of longevity to his career here and all the scoring titles and so on and so forth. Yeah, but PG feels like the odd man out there. Not saying he's not talented, but he just, yeah, he doesn't. He's definitely not a surefire Hall of Famer at this point. He's sort of sitting on that sort of cusp, like say, like a T Mac or like a Vince Carter or something along those sort of lines. That, yeah, I guess
Yeah,
he's
but
still
both those guys made it, didn't they? Like that's the other issue of the Hall of Fame.
is Vince Carter in the Hall of Fame? He's not in the Hall of Fame.
I don't know if he's eligible yet because he only
Oh, okay.
retired recently, so he might be eligible soon. So
T
that's the
Mac's not in
thing.
the Hall of Fame,
Like,
is he?
yeah, I'm pretty sure T Mac's in the Hall of Fame because the issue with the Hall of Fame
T
is
Mac's not in the Hall of
anyone
Fame.
gets into it. I'm very very confident that he was nominated or he is in the Hall of Fame.
Pull it up. Pull it up.
Um, I don't know. Don't worry. I'm trying to. He was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. Let me just double check the year because I only got the thing.
There you
As
go.
part of the class of 2017. As part of the class of 2017. And you look at that. Obviously, for him, it'd be the shooting guard. So his career stats: 7 All Stars, 2 All NBA firsts, 3 seconds, 2 third, 2-time NBA scoring champion, and a Most Improved Player. So, you know what? Let's have a look. I'm very curious
There's
now how
there's
Paul George.
there's your benchmark then. So if T Mac is in, which I wasn't even paying attention, I'm trying to picture now T Mac's induction speech. I cannot picture it. I cannot picture T Mac's induction speech right now. I feel like I have to go YouTube that later. But I guess look,
He's
hey, PG might feel confident. Hey, my resume stacks up reasonably well against T Mac then.
Well, for PG, it's a little bit different. He's got 8 NBA All Star appearances, 1 All NBA first team, 5 3 teams, but he's got a couple of defensive teams that he hasn't. So, his career's still going, isn't it? So
His
maybe
career is
that's
still
how he
going,
can get it.
which might be a
You know
little bit.
what? Maybe that article's not wrong. Maybe, like honestly, with the bar that was just set, maybe that's not the wrong.
Which
Maybe that's not
sort of
wrong.
leads to well, I was gonna raise you, man. Like, how about Khris Middleton, man? I was like looking at his box scores lately, and I was like thinking, is this guy done? And then my second thought was, did the Bucks trade the wrong player?
Well,
What if they kept Drew Holiday, and they had shopped Middleton? Maybe they didn't land Lillard. Maybe they didn't land Lillard, but they'd shopped Middleton before this decline. Because right now, I don't think anyone would want him.
I This is a loaded one. So I guess we'll unpack it a little bit more. So Middleton has that MCL sprain, I believe, a couple of years ago, and I believe tried to play through it. And as someone who has their own battle with knee injuries, um, it's one of those how to like analogy here would be like a car. The second you put a ding on it, you just start to notice all these other little dings or these other little issues, etc. And it's very similar to knees. Once one thing's went wrong, the pristine perfection of it is gone, and then things just start piling up. And for Khris Middleton, who I think now is like 32 or 33,
32.
the miles are there. The miles are really apparent. I think it's suddenly like the wheels falling off. And I know that he's on a minute restriction, and they're able to buffer currently with Damian Lillard trying to settle in and a new coach. But the Bucks are actually in legitimate trouble. And Middleton took a reduced contract, and I think he took that reduced contract because that was probably league value. I don't think he was going to get anything better because people do talk. I think people analyze. I'm sure that there's scouts who are constantly evaluating other players, and he doesn't have the same value as Drew. And I don't think they would have traded Dame Lillard for Middleton and whatever else they got. Maybe they could have given up an extra pick or two or a young player to get that, but I doubt it. And I don't know who else you would have gotten in return.
Well, it's funny because you actually
You look at Chris
proposed, I
Paul.
think if I recall correctly, you proposed a trade for Middleton to the Kings or something along those lines, which I actually thought was absurd, months ago. But I guess right now, if you were the Bucks and you gave up Middleton for what you were trying to pull back in return, maybe along like Harrison Barnes or something along those lines, I think you would feel like, hey, that's not too bad. Because right now, I think Middleton is on his final legs in that sense. And right now though he has no value to the Bucks, and his current sort of output is definitely not going to help them win. His impact is now
They're
no
not.
longer there.
No, and Brook Lopez is their third best player, and Bobby Portis is fourth. Like Khris Middleton's not even like he's the name, but he's not there. I think the funniest thing about that Dame Lillard trade, 10 games in, is that Boston wasn't technically involved in that trade, and they've come out the best team because they swoop in to get Drew Holiday and they dump Rob Williams
Yeah.
on Portland, who now
Yeah.
who now, needs knee surgery. And it's like, so you're telling me that Boston didn't really give up a lot to get Drew Holiday, and everybody else is worse off. Everybody else is worth it. Like Portland, even Portland, you're like, oh, is Aiton panning out the way that you want, or is it the draft picks that were enough to motivate you to keep it? That trade's aging very interesting, right? Because I think we all expected Dame Lillard to just join, and it's like, oh, that duo is going to be unstoppable. And then we've naturally taken the path of they're not unstoppable, so they need more time together. But we're 10 games deep. They're losing to teams that you wouldn't expect them to lose, especially if they're supposed to win the finals. And Dame Lillard's already out with an injury. So I don't love this at all.
Yeah, I don't love that at all. Clearly, I got Dame on my fantasy team. We'll talk about that later. But he suddenly got old. Everyone got old in this trade, and Drew Holiday suddenly seemed like the best piece in everything that moved around here. Isn't that sort of what you're talking about?
Well,
And
it's interesting as well. Like, there's a couple of deceptive trades from the offseason. So obviously we're going to venture into Phoenix. But, Chris Paul leaves. Chris Paul leaves, and we give up on Chris Paul knowing that he's 38 and he always gets injured by the playoffs. And admittedly, we aren't at the playoffs yet. Let's give it time. But he goes to the Wizards. The Wizards are able to flip him for Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole looks absolutely useless, very much validating my opinion of Jordan Poole. So I feel great about that. But Chris Paul all of a sudden is like, the assist to turnover ratio is ridiculous. He's like assisted the second unit. Golden State's back up at being the top of the West. And when you looked at all the players that shifted teams, right? Chris Paul, Drew Holiday, Damian Lillard, Jordan Poole, would you really have put Chris Paul and Drew Holiday leaps and bounds above their counterparts that were traded?
I think that's sort of really great comment there. And if you sort of took a step back and looked at these names with a slightly different filter, not statistically, I think, and obviously, we're not NBA insiders or anything like that. We're not, in any inner circle at any NBA organization. But I guess from the outer as a fan, you would have to say Drew Holiday and Chris Paul have always for years been pros, and always for years have had that high character in the league. In fact, I think they've won like awards that sort of, I don't know, there's all these other league awards, right, that aren't MVPs and scoring titles and blah, 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 that they've won other awards throughout the years for these sort of contributions to the game and obviously, and to their organizations or to their communities in that sort of sense. And so it may not be that shocking that whatever role they're given, wherever they've landed, they're just going to go and do what they can do. And obviously, as their sort of abilities slowly diminish, I guess in a sense, that sort of mindset and characteristic doesn't change. I think that's where you could then go, hey, James Harden, he's been questionable his whole career, right? Yeah. It's like this is why it's like it's not shocking that perhaps things are not going great there, and he's probably not playing a role that he's hoping to right now at least fill in at the Clippers. So I don't know. That's probably part and parcel. I think it's too often you look at stats, but maybe sometimes you got to take a step back and actually look at that player and their bigger profile and personality and sort of consider that point.
Well, I think fit is huge. Like there's so many hypotheticals of players going to the wrong team or not getting their prime in the right spot. But in reference to Drew and Chris, respectively, both strong in the union, which is probably a mindfulness of they understand the brotherhood, they understand the profession, but also teammate of the year stuff. And Chris Paul consistently proven it now. His career will be quite interesting to look at once it's complete because, the whole ringless thing isn't out of the question with the rate that the Golden State's going. But, ends up in New Orleans, which was an interesting scenario, goes to the Clippers, which is an interesting scenario. Like, he's never really dictated his own path. Like, you look at James Harden, him respectively. James Harden's now picked his fourth team. Whereas Khris has really just ended up on teams a lot of the time being traded because value wasn't there. And he consistently joins a new team and turns it around. That OKC year will stand out as being a really impressive 1 year stint from a player. Obviously, Kawhi's got the all-time record for that. But yeah, this Golden State thing, I originally thought that he was trade fodder, but the rate that they're going and what he's getting out of those young guys on the second unit, I actually think that he'd probably see the season through at this pace.
Yeah, look, I think so too. That said, I've got the records in front of me at the moment. Golden State have lost three in a row right now, so they got a little bit of things to just get their ship right again there too. I was looking here, we got the T-Wolves 7-2, six in a row now. They got the best point differential right now. Let me just scroll up. In the West at least, in the West. Okay, and I don't know. I'm not sure if they're legit there. But I'm going to make a claim here, and you're going to clearly refute this. But I think Phoenix are clearly not legit. And, look, I know I'm not saying that they're not going to make the playoffs. You're currently in ninth. I think you're going to have a really rocky season. And I think you're probably not going to go as far as you and everyone and many people had probably anticipated before the season tipped off.
It hurts. I think it hurts, is what it is. So when you paired Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal together, we constantly talked about injuries, right? We talked about how healthy can they stay. And, you start the season open with Brad Beal out with an injury, and you're like, classic, of course, someone's got to be injured, and that. Devin Booker's played 2 games, and I don't know what's wrong with him. And he went from, I believe, like a foot injury to a
He's that
hamstring,
car
and
with
now
a
a
ding,
calf.
man. Isn't that we just covered before? He's that car with a
That's
ding.
like, and I think the issue is Phoenix currently is dealing with a completely new lineup. Devin Booker is the only remaining player from those previous teams. So this is a brand new team. So what we're seeing with the high turnover rate is no surprise. There's continuity issues. Grayson Allen and Eric Gordon look like fantasy steals if you have a deep league, because the amount of minutes that they're getting in Booker's absence is ridiculous. Kevin Durant's on pace to play like 2,500 minutes, so he's going to die at some point. And Brad Beal has looked solid. Brad Beal has looked solid, but like the issue is that we've learned that Brad Beal as a first or second option isn't enough either. So, what this team was supposed to be versus what they are, this outcome's not a surprise.
Well,
The thing that concerns me is Devin Booker's the youngest of the 3 of them, and he was the one who was touted to have the breakout season. I was so encouraged by the playoff stuff. Maybe they're being really cautious at this stage with that mindset of we can throw away the first 20, get these other guys going. Booker can slot in and he'll be fine. But, if we get 20 games, 30 games, 40 games into the season and the big 3 is starting to look like the Nets big 3, where it's like they've only played 5 games together, of course we're not going to win. I wouldn't be ignorant enough to say that. We do not look poised to do much if we can't start getting some continuity. And Minnesota, in reference to how you let in, Minnesota has continuity. Cat was injured a lot last season. Gobert was just trying to figure out how it worked. And Ant Edwards is another year into this impressive start to his career. Their continuity is why they're second. And Denver's continuity with their big 4 and putting in the pieces around Jokic is why they're first. And I think we've had this discussion in the past, but continuity, I think, is going to be one of the biggest factors to teams being successful. And if Phoenix are trying the old throw a talented team together and see what happens, well, they're going to need to start playing together soon, or we're not going to get enough continuity by the time the playoffs roll around.
It's funny. There's two topics here, obviously going with Phoenix and Minnesota. So looking at Phoenix and firstly, I think you expected, and many critics, I guess, expected that you guys would be some high octane, crazy scoring team, 3 guys that could all average 25 points a game and so on and so forth. So, of course, injuries has sort of taken away a component of that because Book's out, Beal started the season obviously injured, and so on and so forth. But correct me if I'm wrong, Frank Vogel has been known as a defensive-minded coach. Like, perhaps that feels like in itself an error of direction to take there. when you're trying to perhaps go that direction of, oh, we got all these guys that are scorers that can just really, get buckets, that you've brought in Vogel. I'm not having a knock on Vogel. I'm talking about fit. Yeah, that you really, I don't know, you got to bring back Mike D'Antoni, yeah, in that sense, and go back to some 5 second or less offense this time around, even something crazier than that. I don't know, that's the thing, all right, that and right now, you guys, your offense is sort of right in the middle of everyone else. Yeah, you're not exceptional. You're clearly not scoring a lot. In fact, Dallas are scoring, head and shoulders above everyone else. Pacers at the moment too, Hawks at the moment, and so on and so forth. But you guys are not in that ballpark. Okay, and surely you probably pick up a little bit when Book comes back, and hopefully there's the fingers crossed that all three of you are healthy. But perhaps the whole sort of plan has not been as well thought out as perhaps you could have considered now that you're 10 games in and you're only 4-6. I don't know. That's something for me that looks like, which sort of then jumps over to the whole T-Wolves one, where there's probably a underrated component there of Mike Conley. Yeah, we talked about
Mm.
CP3. We talked about Drew Holiday. Mike Conley coming to the T-Wolves, it's not like his stats are huge. Just like CP3 now is clearly on the downside of his career of the last few seasons, and his stats are not going to be huge. But I think having such a point guard in your organization that accepts their role, wants to win, and Mike Conley fits exactly that same model. He wants to win, okay? He's looking for his first ring. He's looking to get to the finals and so on and so forth. And he's got talent around him. And right now, I pull up his stats. He's actually having a 50, 40, and 100 season right now. Hasn't missed a free throw right now. Okay, so he's shooting exceptionally efficiently. Okay, and he's only averaging 10 points a game, but I think that's an underrated aspect for the T Wolves because we knocked the T Wolves a lot prior to the Conley trade. Yeah, when they had D'Angelo Russell there, which he plays a whole, he's a different style of point guard, right? And obviously now he's at the Lakers, but I think that's so important. Like you're going back to the Suns. If you guys look, here's a crazy thought. What if you guys had kept campaign? If you guys had kept campaign, yeah, would that make a difference right now? Not only in just having some level of continuation from previous seasons, but that sort of style of play he was able to cover when CP3 sat. I don't know. You'll never know, I guess now.
I I would say interesting points. I think Frank Vogel was brought on to put in a defensive mindset for a team that was going to be fine offensively, irrelevant of who coached them. I think
It can't
that
be
was the
just
logic
fine.
with
They're
that.
just not fine. You just don't go out there and just
No,
figure
but
it out. You need a
here's
coaching
the flip.
system that plays that
Here's
way.
the flip. Here's the flip. So I'm looking at the offensive ratings and the defensive ratings for the teams, right? So we reference Minnesota, who've had an impressive start, and we've referenced Phoenix, who have had a lukewarm start. Phoenix is 1 point better per 100 on the offensive rating, but they are 10 points worse defensively, right? And we know that rhetoric over and over and over again. Defense wins championships. Defense is going to be what gets you there. So Phoenix is a run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-pack, 16th in the league offensive rating team, and Minnesota is 17th, funnily enough. You go to the defensive stats, Minnesota is now first, and Phoenix is 13th. We're sitting right in the middle, really. So it's not a panic button just yet, because ultimately we're going to be able to hinge. What about health? The problem with this is we might just have a what if season because they never get healthy. And so they were a run of the mill offense, a run of the mill defense, and they never got continuity. And we never actually got to see what they were capable of because all three of those players couldn't stay on the court at the same time, right? Whereas Minnesota, at this point of the season, everyone is there and everyone has returned from being there. So, the Mike Conley aspect I like. There was that discussion about Phoenix not having a point guard. Personally, it's not the talking point yet, right? If everyone was healthy and they were in a 4-6 scenario, maybe we start talking about that because something would be going wrong with their offensive rating. But it doesn't surprise me when Kevin Durant scoring 40 plus points against Detroit is celebrated for the reason why they won by like 8. It's not surprising me that things are playing out the way that they're playing out. So
Well, hey, at least you guys are 4-6, unlike my fantasy season, 7-18 right now. And here's a little fun fact, and then, like I told you before we started today, that here's the topic. What does a fantasy manager in last place do at this point of the season? But here's the fun fact. Firstly, I have the second best field goal percentage in the league. Yeah, just behind you actually at 48%. But every team I've played for 3 weeks now has beat me in the field goal percentages. Okay, by shooting 50 over 50% on every single matchup, even though I have a higher average. So yeah, man, I'm a bit of a loss. I made some moves this week. Let's see if I can move the needle a little bit. But hey, man, how did you go last week? I don't know. I haven't even looked at your results.
Oh, I feel like you're setting me up for a bit of a break. I actually swept, so I went
Oh,
9 and
oh, what?
no,
Are
I
you
did
for
not
real?
lose a
Oh, here
category.
comes the brag.
Yeah. So, you know what? I will preface this because we had a really good chat in the group chat that you left because you couldn't handle the heat. We were talking about minutes, and there were some real big minute discrepancies this week. I believe my team actually played 300 more minutes than my opponents. So that's a lot of time that I was able to
How the
accumulate
hell
additional
do you even
stats.
track minutes? Like, man, you said you weren't taking this seriously, and now you're talking about minutes. I
Yeah,
didn't.
so you'd have to go in manually to kind of calculate those things day by
Manually,
day.
oh man.
So
Oh,
I wouldn't recommend doing it. But yeah, look, the schedule and the minute discrepancy. I'm looking at Phoenix. Phoenix aren't playing again until, excuse me, till Saturday. So for players like Devin Booker's not playing, so it's no big deal. But that's a team that won't generate any stats for you until Saturday, which is our Sunday. And you will only get 1 or 2 games out of Phoenix. That's a scheduling issue. And I've looked at some of the teams. I was finally hit with the issue of I had to leave people on my bench because I had too many people playing.
mhm, mhm.
So, there's probably some hindsight merit where maybe I needed to take from a breadth of teams. So I think that's one aspect. Referencing I'm second in that and I'm first in rebounds. I think the reason why I'm currently having success is I am top 3 in every single category. So that means that I will be competitive every week in every category. Whereas for you, you drop to 6th with free throw percentage, and it's a big jump between you and first place. You're at 4th for 3-point percentage. You drop off on blocks as well, going down to 4th. You go down to 4th for turnovers. You're 5th for points scored total. So I think at this point you need, like, obviously this is an overall league. You need players who kind of do everything for you and give you something. You need a bit of a bump in that. Now, we're quite lucky. We have an opponent who was banking on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. And who would have thought that it wasn't injuries that took them down, but it was James Harden that took them down. And the Clippers were a nosedive. And if your 2 best players from that one team are trying to initiate James Harden into their offense, they're clearly in a bit of
True, true.
a grind. You're making a lot of moves. You're making a lot of moves, and I think obviously you've got Luka, and Luka's probably been your best player. Dame Lillard seemed like a good idea, and now isn't panning out the way you wanted. I think Sabonis is doing exactly what you want him to do. Um, I think Gobert, is doing what you want him to do. But
Well, so
Zion,
here's
Anthony
the so
Davis,
going back to percentages, man. We spoke about percentages last week, I think, as well. To me, there's three percentage categories. Yeah, and obviously, you've heard all my complaints about the volume doesn't care matter right now, especially from three. I've had to pivot there, but there's three percentage categories. We're 3 weeks in, so that's 9 areas that you can score from, 9 spots you can score from, right? And I'm currently 0 from 9. Yeah, that feels like an outlier where you just I'm 0 for 9. Like, even if I gone 50%, let's say 4 and 5 out of those categories there, all right, I would then be bumping my standings up to like 11 and 13. Now I'm just below 500. Yeah, I think that's the part here. And like I said, I think. It's a tough one here. Looking at my percentage of some of my players, Dame's not only not scoring clearly, he's like killing me in these categories
mm,
because he's like shooting like I think like 40% from the field and 29% from three, yeah? And that is clearly not Dame Lillard that we sort of even close to expect. And that said, there's other players that I think I've got that, that are shooting quite poorly. You referenced Doncic, obviously, that, he's having once again like a real great statistic year, including the fact like averaging about like I think 6 or 7 turnovers per game. I think at the moment, which is not helping my cause in that category either. So yeah, man, I totally get what you're saying that you know, some of these all-round players that would be nice to sort of pick up, so anyone to pick up in this sort of league. But I don't know, man. I'm not freaking out. I'm just sort of like, I need some, maybe a bit of common sense to just, I don't know, sort of just, for the tide to turn here. Like, surely I can win a freaking percentage round at some point, right? Next week, if I don't win
I
one, I'll be
think
0 from 12.
I think, I want to play everybody once before I start really knee jerking on any trades or acquisitions like that. I feel really good. I felt good every week because I keep saying Booker has yet to really play. Admittedly, that's probably going to come back to haunt me if I keep saying that in 2-3 more weeks. Because I've got a roster slot taken up. Admittedly, he's on injury reserve, but I've got a roster slot taken up by a very talented player who maybe I could flip into something that's more productive overall. Because, yes, Booker would give me really good stats maybe in 6-7 weeks' time, but how much better is he going to give me over what I could get currently? Looking at your team specifically, I think, I actually just think there's a lot of options that aren't number one options on that team, right? So I think, you look at Anthony Davis, and even though Anthony Davis would be impressive, he's not the number one option on his team. Gobert certainly not. Claxton certainly not. Asar Thompson certainly not. Schroeder certainly not. Even Sabonis isn't. Siakam isn't. Hayward isn't. Kyrie isn't. Even Lillard isn't. And I think maybe that's where it's fallen apart for you a little bit. Is
You
you
can't all
don't
get
have number
first
one options.
option players on your team, though.
No, but I think, you know what? Like, I look at my team, for example, and I've managed to, is Jalen Brunson the best player on the Knicks? Maybe. Kyle Kuzma would be giving Jordan Poole a run for that. Jason Tatum. I've got Paolo, Tyrese, DeAndre Ayton, I feel like is probably one of the best players on Portland. Wembanyama, Booker, even Maxey right now looking at like a number 2 option. Look, Maxey for me, I think I picked him knowing that was a hipster pick of he was good last season. He'll probably take a jump this season.
What do you have,
But
Maxey?
for him to drop, I have Maxey. For him to drop 50,
that's hot.
right? Yeah, for him to drop 50, he's averaging 28, 5, 7, 1, 1, and 1. Like, he's averaging 1 turnover, right? Yeah. Like, he's playing out of his mind. And maybe that won't sustain all season. But to get him is pretty ridiculous. To get Tyrese Halliburton, who's averaging 24 and 12, pretty ridiculous. To pick up Şengün off the waiver mark.
Yeah, I'll tell you straight up right now. I was watching him, and then you picked him up like literally the same day I wanted to grab him too. But hey, man, good pick.
No, because he got dropped, and you picked up Claxton for me. And obviously, I loved Claxton when I drafted him for the block potential, but Claxton's not playing at the moment, so I don't know what's going on with that. Tatum, I know that you're really anti-Tatum, but he's shooting 50% from the field. 78% from free throw, almost 40% from 3, averaging 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 28 points. That Boston Big Five, any of them are good value. Like, that's the crazy thing.
Hey, look, man, you're going well. You're going well. Early days, I guess. Maybe my last question to you is: at what point do you cut loose Harden?
Well, so here's the thing. So I've had to make a decision several times now: Harden or Westbrook, right? Westbrook was really interesting for a while because he'd give you these weird steal games. You get like 6 steals or 4 steals or 4 blocks or something. But now that they're both there, I've been picking Harden every single time. Harden averages 1.2 points less than Westbrook. Surprisingly, is averaging less turnovers, about the same in blocks, about the same in steals, a little bit less in assists, and a little less in rebounds, but a little bit better in shooting overall. I've actually just replaced Westbrook with Harden currently. And I feel like if I dropped either of them, I'm not going to be hurt, right? Because Westbrook, Harden, they're both the third option on that team, or at least theoretically they should be. I think I'm doing okay. So I might be able to package them in a trade. Chet and Wemby have been really interesting as well. Like, Wemby, for all of the good stuff that he does, he had a game where he had 7 turnovers. That's not exactly what I love. But then he has 38 points against Phoenix and 6 blocks. So he's really interesting. But Chet, on the other hand, Chet hasn't had those massive swings that I was expecting. So surprisingly, Chet is averaging 0.7 blocks. After that big game where he had 7 in a game, and I felt really validated in that choice, he's actually just not blocking shots, which is Sorry, I've misread it. He's only averaging 2 blocks instead of the 3 or 4 I expected. That's
So
the
so
joys of
misread that stat again. So you're saying you want to trade Claxton for Chet Holmgren?
No, I definitely wouldn't trade that. And look, the thing with Chet is that he's averaging good percentages. I think I really like my team. I'd be curious who could offer me something
Hey, dude, you're in
interesting.
first place. What else are you supposed to say? So, I
I
guess.
think I think I've just enjoyed this segment on a week to week basis. That is just me really unpacking how great I am at fantasy right now. This is
Well,
this is really nice.
sometimes you just gotta ride it when your horse is winning, right? So, you look, keep it going. We'll talk again next week. I'm gonna hit this button now.